The time is now 5:33 p.m. I would like to call the February 10th Academic Achievement Committee meeting of the school year 2024 to 2025. Good evening. Oh, shoot. I'm Jamal J. Jongo, the chair of the Academic Achievement Committee and a student member of the board for Prince George's County Public Schools. I would like to welcome our committee. I would like to welcome our committee members and board representatives, Dr. Tiffany Anderfold, Mrs. Akia Goins McCants, and Mrs. Lolita E. Walker. A special welcome to Dr. Judith White, the Chief Academic Officer, the Superintendent Designee, along with her team who will be leading tonight's presentations. Before we begin, we will have introductions starting with board members, administrative staff, and board office staff. Thank you. This committee will virtually meet on Mondays at 5:30 p.m. each month with topics posted in advance on board docs. Okay.
The board members would
Um,
like them to introduce themselves. Mr. Jungle.
okay. It's fine. So
We just had the board members introduce themselves at this time.
No problem. Zakia Goins McCants, Board Member, District 8.
And I'm Dr. Tiffany Anderfold, Board Member, District 1.
okay, so tonight we will have 3 presentations, including 2 were scheduled from the December 16th, 2024 meeting. For those unable to join us live, a recording will be available on the PGCPS YouTube channel and board docs. Now we will proceed with roll call. Ms. Lopez, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Jungle,
Present.
Ms. Walker. Dr. Anderful,
Present.
Mrs. Goins McCants.
Present.
There are 3 members present.
Okay. A quorum is present. If there are no objections, the committee shall adopt the February 10th, 2025 meeting agenda. There being no objections, the meeting agenda is adopted. If there are no corrections, the committee shall approve the January 27th, 2025 meeting minutes as distributed. There being no corrections, the meeting minutes are approved. There are no registered public comment speakers for this evening.
All right, well, thank you. Then we'll go ahead and get started. I'm filling in for Dr. White, our Chief Academic Officer. My name is Kia McDaniel. I am the Director of Curriculum and Instruction. And so as you mentioned, we have lots of information for you all this evening, including 2 previously scheduled presentations. So we're going to get moving. Before we do that, though, I will ask if everyone can introduce themselves so you know who all of our presenters are. And then we will turn it over to Ms. Leona Smith after we have introductions. So I'm going to turn it over to my team, Victoria and Shannon, to introduce themselves, and then have other teams introduce themselves.
Good evening, Victoria Holmes, Coordinating Supervisor for Language and Literacy in the Office of Curriculum and Instruction.
Good evening, Shannon Landefeld-Yawoski, Instructional Specialist. I'm sitting in for the Supervisor, Simone McQuaige, for Elementary Reading English Language Arts.
Good evening, I'm Jamie Bowers. I'm the Director of Testing, Research, and Evaluation.
Good evening, Anthony Whittington, Director of Monitoring and Accountability.
Good evening, Leona Smith. I'm the Innovation Officer for Transformation Leadership and Continuous Improvement, and I have three outstanding principals here with me that I'll let them introduce themselves. We'll start with Dr. Stoddard, followed by Ms. Smith, and then Dr. Faulkner Jones.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Anita Stoddard. I'm the principal at Doswell Brooks Elementary School.
Good evening, everyone. Brandy Smith, proud principal at Samuel P. Massey Academy.
Good evening, everyone. Lisa Faulkner Jones, the proud principal of Bladensburg High School.
All right, I think, does that conclude our introductions? We're ready to get started. I'm going to share my screen now. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right, can everyone see my screen? Okay, wonderful. We'll get great. Good evening, everyone. We're excited to be here to talk about our Comprehensive Support and Improvement, or CSI schools. So I'm excited to share. We have this evening, we're going to do some reconnecting on what it is our office, along with other offices, do to support our schools. Remind everybody, including our public and our parents, what a CSI school is. Share a little bit about our current work. And then we are pleased to have three principals here to share the strategies that they're implementing in their schools, followed by some future work and some questions. Again, thank you for having us here, to the board members and the members of this committee. We'd like to start with this graphic. You may have seen this graphic before if you watched the previous academic committee when we presented in the fall. This is a graphic that we like to ground our work in. When we think about the question, what is it that we are going to intentionally do to support our CSI schools? This is the graphic that comes to mind, that we know that real change happens when these four things are in place: strategy, innovation, leadership, and where we might transform or transformation of our practices. And so research says that really when these four things come together, that is when we see real change for our students. So we will ground our conversation in these terms this evening. Ultimately, what we know is that what we want for all of our schools, including our CSI schools, is that we want all of our students to acquire the skills they need as outlined in our student learner profile, and really for us to meet the goals of our strategic plan in the T26. Here in Prince George's County Public Schools, we are so fortunate that we have a robust system of supports. This is a district-wide effort. Although our office is leading the conversation this evening, we are working in collaboration with many departments who are on this call, including the Department of Accountability, including academics, our area team, Title I. All of us come together to support our schools to make sure that they have the resources, the professional development, all the tools they need to be successful. As you can see on this screen, it really is a group effort. Different offices are playing different roles in the way in which they engage in our schools. And so one thing that our office does, the Office of Transformation, Leadership, and Continuous Improvement, is to help bring some coherence to this work, bringing all of these offices together, ensuring that there is connection, there is collaboration, considering where we might find innovative practices or strategies, and helping us to become aligned. In a large and vast district such as ours, we want to make sure that we are eradicating any silos unintentionally, and that we are all working together to support our students, our families, and our schools. And so again, this is a district-wide effort. So what is a CSI designated school? And forgive me if you've heard this before, we want to make sure everybody on the call hears it, and for our families and our public who's watching. So a CSI school stands for a Comprehensive Support and Improvement School. And this is a designation that is given to schools by the Maryland State Board of Education, or MSDE, if you've heard that acronym. There are 4 ways that a school can be identified as a CSI school, as you can see on the screen. A school can become a CSI school for being a low-performing school, a school that has a low graduation rate, a school that has not exited previously in a different status, or a school that has a low-performing student group that we would like to monitor and support. Currently in Prince George's County Public Schools, we have 24 CSI schools. We have 15 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 3 K-8 schools, and 3 high schools. All of our schools in Prince George's fall in 2 categories. They are the 2 that are highlighted yellow on the screen. Our elementary schools, our middle schools, and our K-8 have been identified for a specific low-performing student group, and our 3 high schools are working towards an increased graduation rate. So that is what it means to be a CSI school. In order to exit this status, just making sure our public knows and our families know, there are 2 different ways. For our high schools who are focused on low graduation rate, there has to be a greater than 66.7 graduation rate consecutively in 2 years to exit that status. For our schools that are working on a specific low student performance group, and what we mean by that might be a specific demographic of students, such as students with disabilities, students who are multilingual learners. Those are the 2 that are predominant in our district. Those schools have 2 targets to meet. The state of Maryland ranks all of our Title I schools, and they identify the lowest 5% of schools. And so our schools in Prince George's County Public Schools who are CSI have to be above that low 5%. Additionally, the student group in which they were identified for must meet annual targets that have been set by the state. So incremental increments every year, and it is unique to every school. So this is what it means to be a CSI school. So let's talk a little bit about the current work of our CSI schools. So again, in collaboration with lots of people on this call across our district and external partners, we're excited to share some of the work we've done to support our schools when we think about the connection of strategy, leadership, and innovation in order to transform our schools. All of our CSI school leaders and some of their team members have participated in institutes to really think through high leverage strategies, leadership moves, and to learn more about improvement science through our partners at the University of Maryland and what cycles of improvement looks like. There is a science behind how we do improvement work in organizations such as school systems. So this summer, our leaders came to a 3-day institute, and we're pleased that just last week, we finished our Winter Institute, where we brought our leaders together to engage not only with our partners at University of Maryland and our partners in curriculum and instruction, but also we had members of the MSDE, or the Maryland State Department of Education team there, to really ensure that we all had the same understanding and alignment about how to work through the improvement process together and how to exit. We also know that leadership is a key part of this work. And so we are pleased to work collaboratively across many offices to ensure our leaders have all of the skills they need and the resources. And so some of our principals have engaged in principal coaching, and they have a coach that they work with all year long to support them in understanding improvement work or working with their leadership team. Every month, we bring our principal leaders together who are designated as CSI principals for professional learning, where we talk through high leverage strategies, compliance efforts that we need to do, learn from our curriculum partners, and really connect with one another as thought partners. Also in Prince George's County Public Schools, to really support our CSI schools, all of our CSI schools are also designated as a community school. And so they have received additional funding and resources through the Community Schools Grant through the state of Maryland to support that wraparound approach to ensuring our schools and our communities have what they need. And we'll share a little bit more about that later in this presentation. New since the fall, if you were here in the fall, we have also launched our cross-departmental school plan review protocol. So we have members from various different offices working together to review all of the school plans that our schools have worked hard and diligently on to ensure they are aligned to their needs, provide feedback so that we can design support and professional development to support them. And then finally, innovation. Where have we added new things to support our schools and on top of the ways in which all of our schools get support? There is now a team that meets regularly bi-weekly. It's a cross-department collaboration and steering committee where we come together and we plan the professional development. We talk about monitoring school improvement, all the things and the resources that our schools need. So that's one thing that has been launched this year to really align this work, bring some cohesion, and monitor and support our schools. Our high schools participate in district level support teams where they get targeted and strategic support on a specific problem of practice. And it's a wraparound approach where many departments come to their school, meet with them, do walkthroughs, and provide resources. This year, our area teams, so if you're unfamiliar, all of our schools are under the supervision of area teams. And our area teams, which consists of an associate superintendent and instructional directors, meet quarterly with our CSI principals to review current student data, enact through reflective activities to really ensure that we are meeting the goals outlined in their comprehensive school improvement plans. We are building our leaders' capacity to coach others. We know that really, if we want to improve practices of our students, we want to ensure that our teachers have all that we need. So we're supporting our leaders and building their toolkit around coaching practices. And then finally, an innovative practice we've added this year that I'll provide an update shortly on is we have launched and implemented the OGAP Math Professional Development Series, which is a formative math assessment series. So lots of great things to support our CSI schools happening. So what is OGAP? Just want to ensure that everyone knows. So OGAP is a formative assessment learning process. So teachers participate in a 4-day professional development in one of 4 areas that really aligns to whatever grade level or grade span that they're teaching, whether it's their direct classroom or through some intervention or remediation. And so they may attend an addition strategy, an addition professional development, multiplication, fractions, and proportionality. This summer and this past summer, we had 86 teachers from our CSI schools participate in that 4-day institute. And following that institute, 100% of the participants said that this will enhance their teaching practice and that they're leaving excited. So much so that we've added on a winter cohort. So we've just finished the first week of our winter cohort. We have added 60 additional teachers. Many have requested that they want to attend additional sessions. They're so excited. They want to know all 4 content areas. Our principals of our CSI schools have participated in an overview session, and our central office leaders have as well. All of our teachers who have engaged in this professional development, which is also vetted from the Maryland State Department of Education, receive ongoing coaching. So they receive coaching in 2 ways. They receive coaching directly from the OGAP facilitators who come multiple times a year to provide them coaching sessions, as well as members of our office have gone out and provided school visits as needed as well. So we are very excited about our OGAP initiative. What we know in Prince George's County that many of our students do need support with math. And so we are hopeful that this is another strategy to help teachers look at the way in which students learn math and think about the next step in their math instruction. So you've heard a lot from me. Now, I think the most important part is this is that district approach, but what does this sound like on the ground in our schools? So I'm very pleased to have with us this evening 3 schools with us, 3 principals. An elementary principal, an academy principal, and then a high school principal, each to tell you a little bit about just a few of the strategies because they are doing a lot to support their students. So they're going to share a little bit about a strategy that's being impactful for them. And then we will come back and wrap this up. So we are going to start off with Dr. Anita Stoddard to introduce herself and share a little bit more about the strategies that she is trying this year at her school as a CSI principal. Dr. Stoddard.
Well, good morning, good morning, it's not morning. Good evening, everyone. I'm thinking I'm at school. Sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. I am so excited to be here with you to share in reference to our school and what we are doing in reference to CSI. So as I stated earlier, my name is Dr. Anita Stoddard. I am the proud principal of Doswell E. Brooks Elementary School. I have been in Prince George's County for 33 years, and for the last 20 years, I have been the principal at Doswell. Doswell is a comprehensive school, but it's also a very unique school. We do have a large deaf and hard of hearing population at Doswell E. Brooks. So I want to share that with you. Doswell services all of the students in the county who are sign language dependent, or their parents may choose to send them to Doswell if they are non-sign language dependent and they are in the regular classroom. So in self-contained classrooms, we have 44 students that are either deaf or hard of hearing. I have 9 students that are in the regular classroom. So that means that student is hard of hearing, but they have enough hearing with an amplification device that they are able to be in a regular classroom with modifications, accommodations, and some type of hearing device. Most of our teachers wear microphones that Bluetooth into the hearing aid. And then we have 8 students in our early childhood program. And then we have 32 students who are regular ed resource students. So our special education population is 29%. We are in a CSI status because of our special education scores. So many people, when they look at our percentage of students that are special education students, they are like, why is their percentage so high? Every student that is a deaf and hard of hearing student also has an IEP. And so we have from birth to grade 5, about over 60 students who are deaf and hard of hearing. And then we have our regular education students who are being serviced, regular education, special education students who are being serviced. So I want to quickly talk about 3 things that we are implementing in our building when it comes to CSI. Number 1, our stat days. So we have stat days at Doswell every quarter, just like we do in the county for our schools. Our stat days mirror what it is that we do in our CSI stat days. Doing the stat days this way, it allows the teachers to take accountability for their own data. So they have about 10 minutes to speak about their data, just like we do. I think we may have 15 minutes as the principal. And then you have people that can either ask you questions or give you suggestions, and then you do a wrap up. And so that's how our stat days are structured at Doswell. And again, it mirrors our CSI stat days. The next thing is our CSI liaison. We are building her capacity in a way that, as she would say, she never thought. So number 1, she has insights into all areas of schools. Many times people's lens are very narrow when it comes to schools, but she gets to see everything. So making the connection with the budget, the SBB budget, the CSI, funds that we get for CSI, community schools. She is boots on the ground with all of that. Schedules and helping us come together with the schedule and understanding the impact of a schedule when it comes to our instructional program. The CSI plan, can't say enough about that. My CSI liaison is the person who is the leader when it comes to the plan. She makes sure that that plan is a living document in our building every day. I have a million things to do, and I'm going to be honest. She is the person that says, Stoddard, we need to do this. I looked at the plan. In fact, today, one of the things that she said something we said we were going to do in our plan, we just haven't done. We need to make sure that we do X, Y, and Z. She is the leader when it comes to CSI. The last thing is, with my CSI liaison, I am coaching her, but she is coaching other teachers. And I love that model. So first of all, she leads the meetings. I do not lead the meeting. I am a member of the team. I am the leader of the building, but I do not lead those meetings. She does. So when it comes to after the meetings and we do our debriefing, then I am coaching her with our see it, name it, do it structure that we have all been learning about this year and last year in our leadership meetings. And then she can use that same structure when she's giving feedback to teachers using the exact same structure. But I think the big thing for the CSI liaison, again, is we have built her capacity. Lastly, you heard Ms. Smith talk a lot about OGAP and what that is. I have to tell you, we love the OGAP task in our building. And here's why. I know that we have milestone tasks and expert tasks, and we have all of that built into our curriculum. That is true. But in school buildings, everybody is not in the same place at the same time. So when we sit to go over those tasks and look at student work when it comes to those tasks, people are in different places. When we're doing the OGAP task, we are all doing them at the same time. When we then take those tasks in order to do the protocols and talk about our students with disabilities and talk about our ML students, number one, we are not separating our deaf and hard of hearing students from our regular education students in terms of special ed. We are just looking at them as special education students. Number two, everyone in the building on that grade level has done the same task. As you all know, when the kids take MCAP and other standardized tests, they are taking grade level standardized tests. It is a time for us all to look at a grade level task all together and look at the misconceptions for all students in the building at the exact same time. And we do absolutely love that. The tasks are about, they are reasoning tasks. They are tasks that let me see, how do I say this? The tasks are reasoning tasks that everyone can look at, and they're on different grade levels. And so we are super excited about that. And then lastly, our teachers that have gone to the OGAP training, although, close your ears, Ms. Smith, it is not set up for them to do turnkey, but because we have decided to do all of the tasks in the building, we had to do some turnkey training so that they know what it is that they're doing. I do understand the process is not to do turnkey and they need to go to the 4-day training. Got it. But when we decided to do all of the OGAP tasks as a school, to go through the protocol and to talk about special education and ML students, and we decided that we were going to do that, we had to do some turnkey training in the building so that people would understand what it was that they were doing, why they were doing it, and what the process was for doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Starter. I was trying to find my mute key. I appreciate that comprehensive explanation of the ways in which you're leading your school through this process. And for our public who's watching, when we say the word stat, it's a way to come and look at our statistics, our data.
Sorry.
So thank you for that. So next, we will have Principal Brandy Smith to share more about the work she's doing at Samuel Massey Academy.
Smith. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. Again, I am Brandy Smith, the proud principal at Samuel P. Massey Academy. We are a pre-K-8 academy located in Forestville, Maryland. We are a neighborhood school and we service approximately 480 scholars. Our CSI designation is for students with disabilities. However, we are low performing overall. This is my second year there, and two of the major areas of focus for us include chronic absenteeism and improving academic performance through professional learning for all staff. Our chronic absenteeism in school year 23 was 50%. At the end of school year 24, we lowered it to 40.7%, and we are currently sitting at 28% chronic absenteeism right now. I will be completely honest, it is an exhausting task, and there's no way I could possibly do it without the support and the funding from a multitude of sources. And so my strategies tonight include how I align my funds from SBB, community schools, Title I, and community partnerships to address chronic absenteeism, as well as professional learning. So the first thing that we did for middle school specifically, as that was our targeted area from last school year's data, is we established a middle school mentorship program, and that is held weekly. And as a result, our middle school chronic absenteeism has decreased by over 20% for this upcoming school year. The children just have a great opportunity to bond and build relationships, and they find a reason to want to come to school. Secondly, we are very heavy on incentives for attendance. We are looking to have 94% attendance or higher, but we are also looking to incentivize those scholars who have shown an improvement in their attendance for each month and quarter. Our incentives range from field trips out of the building to guest speakers brought into the building, and just different rewards that we get to learn what the students want through student surveys. Next, we focus a lot on family engagement, and we try to bring the community into the building as much as possible. We're able to offer parent conferences, parent workshops, and in addition to that, we have really been able to expand expand our staff this year by purchasing 2 student advocates and a parent engagement assistant. This allows us to have a richer attendance task force team that we're called at my school. We conduct home visits daily. We have students on attendance contracts. We reach out to different community resources and support to see what they can provide free resources for our parents. And we also have different services and programs come into the building since our parents don't necessarily travel outside of the community very much. And finally, we are looking to increase our students' attendance by providing all school supplies. So whatever supplies they need, they are provided on the first day of school, and they are replenished again mid-semester and again finally at the end of the year. We are looking forward to bringing in motivational speakers and to increase our family engagement for next semester. So as I said in the start, it's exhausting and it's ongoing. Something that might work today doesn't work tomorrow, so we just have to continually act, assess, and adjust. And then secondly, we work on improving academic performance for all staff members, and we do this through our partnership with Innovagus. They come in to do capacity building for our staff. And then the OGAP Math Initiative has been huge. And while it's very new to all of us, through the partnership with Transformational Leadership and Continuous Improvement, we have been able to have multiple staff members from grades pre-K the whole way through, K through 8th, participate in the training, and they're able to bring it back and do turn and talks with our staff members and share out in that way. So a lot of excitement, which I didn't think they would honestly have, but they are super, super excited. And most importantly, they're starting to become more comfortable with building their math capacity. It's, as I said, attendance and academic achievement go hand in hand. And so we're always continually assessing what we can do better. We are a work in progress, but we are very blessed and thankful to have the funding and the partnerships that we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Principal Smith, for that robust explanation and the family engagement and your intentional strategies. We're excited to hear that your families and your teachers are excited. And so lastly, we're pleased to share Ms. Faulkner Jones, who's going to talk about her work at Bladensburg High School.
And so again, I'm Lisa Faulkner Jones, the proud principal of Bladensburg High School. Bladensburg High School serves a diverse and dynamic student body with an enrollment of approximately 2164 students with 2,164 students in grades 9 through 12. We support a highly transient population, including many students with interrupted education. Our demographic is about 75% Hispanic, a little less than 20% Black or African American, or let's say Black, African, and or African American. We are about 84% of the students are economically disadvantaged, highlighting the need for targeted supports and resources. Bladensburg High School is committed to meeting the diverse academic needs of our students. A significant portion of our scholars are overage and undercredited, and they are essentially illiterate in their first language. So therefore, it's a slight lag in their acquisition of their second language. And for some of them, they've had interrupted education. So many are also faced with language barriers that require support in acquiring English proficiency while earning credit toward graduation. Mathematics continues to be an area that requires our most growth. To address this, we have implemented the ongoing assessment project, OGAP, which supports the development and reinforcement of key mathematical concepts. Although you see the grade bands, oftentimes we have to divorce ourselves of grade bands and look at where students' needs lie. And so it allows us the opportunity to, remediate some of the foundational skills while continuing their mathematical growth. We know that those skills are aligned to about 80% of the Common Core state standards for mathematics across all grade levels. At the core OGAP, OGAP is teacher knowledge and professional development grounded in mathematical educational research. And the Office of Transformational Leadership and Continuous Improvement has been instrumental in this work by providing targeted support and professional development rooted in improvement science. The strategic approach has equipped us as leaders and educators with data-driven methodologies to identify and address learning gaps, ensuring continuous refinement of instructional practices to better serve our population. Our multilingual learners, a standout success is our academic initiatives, which we have a school-wide initiative, which is CER, which is actually claim, evidence, and reasoning to support them as they acquire the language. We try really hard to equip them with a strategy in which they tackle academic-based tasks. And the initiatives have supported the performance of our multilingual learners who have outperformed all other subgroups in RELA. This achievement has been made possible through strategic funding from community schools, which has afforded community schools and Title I in conjunction with our SBB, which affords us the opportunity to do extended learning opportunities, which allows targeted support for the different groups in the areas in which they need the tailored resource. The impact is evident. It has really impacted their ability to score very robustly in comparison to when we started. It has also instilled in our students the ability to build confidence, which has led to the students' consistent acquisition of the seal of biliteracy, which has increased every year that I've been in the principalship, and this is year 5. And it's also increased their confidence to take on advanced placement courses. So we have seen students successfully getting the seal of biliteracy in both Spanish and French, which has in turn enabled them to challenge themselves academically while demonstrating proficiency in multiple languages. Throughout our focus areas in mathematic intervention, language acquisition, and culturally responsive instruction, Bladensburg High School is actively closing achievement gaps and empowering students with skills necessary for success in college and career. With the support of the Office of Transformational Leadership and Continuous Improvement, our strategic investments, targeted supports, and commitment to equity are yielding tangible results. Although it's a marathon and not a sprint, it's ensuring that every student has the opportunity to thrive.
Wow. Thank you, Principal Faulkner Jones. We appreciate that commitment to our students being ready to enter the workforce and be ready to be college and career ready. We want to thank our principals for joining us this evening. We're going to go ahead and excuse them so that they can get ready for school tomorrow. Thank you, principals, for your time and your leadership and your commitment to improvement in culture and families and students. I will keep going on. We just have a few more slides. Thank you so much. And so, we are still a work in progress, working together across our district. It's not just our office. There's many great offices supporting this work. We will continue with the OGAP initiative. We're continuing with coaching and professional development. We're working with our area teams to continue our quarterly data reviews. That's the stat day you heard about. We are pleased that our partners in accountability will be offering data literacy professional development for our school leaders and their school teams. We worked to launch a progress monitoring tool this year that we're working collectively in that steering committee to monitor the success and the impact of our strategies at our school. And this summer, we will be bringing our leaders together again to talk about leading this work. We know we have more to do in the future. We want to continue to build capacity. We want to continue to answer that question, what are we intentionally doing to support our neediest schools and students? And how are we leveraging our community and our business partners? We want to talk about retaining our students, keeping our families engaged in this work so that they are aware. And most importantly, how do we leverage the space for our students to have a voice in this work and own some of this work as well? And that concludes our presentation. We thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Leona and team. We appreciate the principals. I know they had to go, but we do appreciate everything they had to share. I know we have to transition to our next presentation, but if there are any questions from board members for Ms. Smith about the CSI process or anything that was shared, we can take those now while Mr. Whittington is getting set up.
Board members, are there any questions? Oh, okay. Dr. Anderful.
Thank you, Chair Jongo. Thank you all so much for this presentation. This is really helpful to hear about. I was actually looking for the list of all of the schools that you all work with. Is there somewhere that I can find that? I see that there are 24 and the actual range of them.
Yes, Dr. Anderful, I'll be sure to get you a direct list, and also the list also exists on the Maryland State Department of Education as well, but I will make sure to get you a list as well. So for our community that's watching, your school leaders should be telling you that your school is a CSI school, as well as we will ensure that we get a list to our board members. And you can also find information about your school and how they're doing academically on their school report card as well, which is found on the Maryland State Department of Education website.
Thank you. And Ms. Smith, is there a reason why it's not on our on the PGCPS website?
I don't believe so, and I'll make sure I'll double check on that and follow up with the right parties about how we might communicate that.
Okay, thank you. And I only say that because, you know, I think this is a great offering, right, that we have when we talk about supports. We want to, you know, I'm often having conversations, you know, I'm a parent of the school system myself, and, you know, when we have these different, you know, programs that are providing supports to schools, I think we need to make sure that parents have access to that information, and that they know that there are some great things happening in our schools to offer supports to those who need it. So there's one of my children there. So thank you. I'll go on mute.
Is there any other questions? Okay, I will do one question. So first, I had kind of the same question as board member Anderful. It was more just basically of like where could we see where the schools are so that if parents or if like just community leaders around wanted to be able to reach out and ask more about the program, where could they can know which schools are actually have the program implemented. Another thing I was asking, because I heard like I think it was, I can't remember her name. One of the principals had said something on chronic absenteeism, and I was wondering like according to like the data, like how bad has absenteeism affected the program, and um maybe you could maybe I missed how long the program's been going for, but from the length of the program, do we see a increase or a decrease in the chronic absenteeism, and is it improving our scores, or is it still kind of the same?
And there are many great people on this call that can also jump in on the specific data. But I think you asked a really great point. You have to be in school to learn. And so attendance is a really important piece. I know we have a goal to reduce our chronic absenteeism rate as a district by 3% as well. And the school that you heard say that was Principal Smith at Samuel Massey, when you heard her say she went from 50% chronic absenteeism to under 20, around 20, I think she said 25%. So I don't have that specific data right now per school, but I will say you asked another question in there about how long has this been going on. So all of our schools who are currently CSI, they are in a 3-year cycle, so they're in year 2. So at the end of next year, the state will reevaluate the progress our schools are making to determine their status moving forward. And one of the things all of our schools are measured on is our chronic absenteeism rate and our attendance rate. And I know Mr. Whittington's office does a great job of sharing that information as well. But we do have some of that information available. I just don't personally have it in front of me right now.
And while we won't be sharing it specifically for the CSI schools this evening, that's what Mr. Whittington's presentation is going to cover, Mr. Jongo, so you'll hear a little bit about that in a few.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Board member Goins McCants.
Thank you, Chair Jongo. Ms. Smith, you kind of answered part of my question already. I was going to ask about the length of time, if this is, CSI is nationally normally a 3-year cycle, where we were in that. But then also when we're provided that list to Board Member Anderful and the rest of the board, could we also get the list of just how long, if any of those schools, excuse me, are repeat CSI schools?
Absolutely. We'll make sure to get you that information.
Thank you.
If there are no additional questions, then we will move on to our next presentation from the Office of Monitoring and Accountability.
So good evening, everyone. I'll jump in too. Yeah, so I just want to let everybody know I've joined. So Anthony, go ahead. Go on with your slides.
Hey, when the boss speaks, we will be quiet.
No
Good
worries.
evening, board members. Anthony Whittington, Director of Monitoring and Accountability. And coming behind me will be Dr. Jamie Bowers. She's the Director of Department of Testing, Research, and Evaluation. But today I want to talk a little bit about chronic absenteeism and our pass rates within our school district through Q1 grades. Next slide. As you know, chronic absenteeism is a measure that identifies when students have missed at least 10% of their membership days, or let's think of them as their school days, and it's regardless of reasons. This includes excused as well as unexcused absences, and as well as suspensions. Those two count towards your chronic absenteeism rate. Now, in addition, schools receive points on their Maryland Accountability Report cards for students not chronically absent. Things that can contribute to chronic absenteeism or affect the chronic absenteeism. Well, chronic absenteeism leads to more poor academic achievement. It can lead to potential dropping out of school, and high chronic absenteeism rates makes it very difficult for students to achieve at a high level. The next 3 slides compares our district's chronic absenteeism rates this school year versus last school year during the same time period, which would be Q1. Now, as you can see, this first slide is an elementary school breakdown where we're experiencing a 5 percentage point reduction rate. Good news. Next slide. Middle school grade span, we're experiencing a 5 percentage point reduction as well. And in high school, we experience roughly a 4 percentage point reduction in chronic absenteeism. Although these results are early, this is still good news. More students are coming to school. The next few slides provides a clear evidence as to how chronic absenteeism can contribute to your academic achievement. As I look at grades 2 through 5, I see a stark difference in the grade distribution of students deemed not chronically absent versus those students that have missed extended time in school. 76% of the students that are not chronically absent are receiving a grade of A or B, which is represented in the blue and the orange. Now, as we look at the next grade span, middle school, grades 6, 7, and 8. This comparison is even greater, as 65% of the not chronically absent students are receiving a passing grade of A or B. And as you notice, only 38% of the chronically absent students are receiving similar grades. Again, within the high school ranks, we're experiencing similar results as middle school, with 61% of the not chronically absent students receiving a passing grade over A or B, while only 29% of the chronically absent students are mirroring those same results. This certainly points to your attendance playing a vital role in the student's academic success. Lastly, I would like to look into the passing rate of our core content areas or classes. When I reference pass rate, I'm referencing the data represented of students receiving an A, B, C, or D, meaning they have passed that particular course. The core content courses will include mathematics, English language arts, science, and social studies. The passing rates are broken down by student group, which represents race and/or ethnicity, and the passing rates of a few of our service groups, multilingual learner and students with disabilities. In elementary school, grades 2 through 5, as you see, almost all student groups are passing at a very high rate of 99%. In middle school, we experience very slight decline, but as you see, overall, 96% of our middle school students are passing their core courses. Keep in mind, core courses are English, language arts, science, social studies, and mathematics. While in high school, we start to see or start to notice a number of students failing at least one of their core courses. Our district's overall pass rate has moved from 99% in elementary school to 96% in middle school to now 88% overall in high school. Now, one reason for this drop could be because high school is an exiting entity, or this is the first time students are bearing credits, meaning that you must pass your classes in order to graduate from school. Whereas middle school and elementary school, they are receiving grades, but this is the training ground in preparation for them moving into high school and then passing their core courses. The next 3 slides simply reference the same information, but simply looking through the lens of a few of our service groups, our multilingual learners, and our students with disabilities. But as you see, we see similar trends. The majority of students in elementary school are passing at a high rate in these 2 service groups. In middle school, we see a slight decrease, but the majority of them are still excelling or passing their core courses. Next slide. This represents the middle school, where 96% of all students are passing their core courses. And within these 2 service groups, 93 and 95 respectively are passing, which is a very high rate, a high pass rate. And then high school is where we see more of the students having some challenges passing one or more of their core courses, which would be our next slide. Dropping down to 88% overall, and within these 2 service groups, 81% of the multilingual learner and 86% of the students with disabilities. I will now turn, this is information if you need any further contact with my office and our team. And I will now pass this information over to Dr. Jamie Bowers.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Whittington. And before Jamie gets started with our benchmark and DIBELS data, were there any questions or comments for Mr. Whittington?
I see that I think all board committee members have comments. Board member Goins McCants.
Thank you so much, Committee Chair Jongo. Mr. Whittington, can you explain, especially for some of the public here, what it constitutes as a passing grade for PGCPS?
Passing grade would be a letter grade of an A, a B, a C, or a D.
Thank you. And then my other question, you might not be able to give us the specifics on it now, but is it possible that we could get the core content pass rates for students with disabilities and multilingual learners specifically by grade? So when we get to Like we have them by elementary, middle, and high school, but especially for high school, can we see those numbers by freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors, so that we can better pinpoint where we need to provide additional interventions? Thank you.
Dr. Anderful?
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for this presentation, Mr. Whittington. I think in a similar line of thought as my fellow board member, Ms. Goins McCants here, there's a lot of data here. Oh, there's an echo. Can you hear that? Did you hear an echo?
No, ma'am.
Okay, let me know if it. Okay. There's a lot of data here, but and while I see it disaggregated in a couple of ways, I think I'd be curious to see it disaggregated a bit more, right? And so board member Goins McCants mentioned kind of breaking out year to year. I think that would be helpful. In addition to that, I think we're talking about the core content areas. Like, could we break it out by core content, like by each content area? I'd be curious to see, and I have some assumptions, but I'd be curious to see a little bit more about which specific areas where we're seeing students having challenges, or where we're seeing students pass, like where the rates are higher. I think that could be helpful. And I'm also just curious to know, I understand that your office is the Office of Monitoring and Accountability, but what do we do with this data, right? Like, I see some opportunities for it to be used to inform, strategies, but I'm wondering if there is some additional work that happens with this data, some additional analysis. You referenced one potential reason for, a drop in high school, a decline in high school, but I'm just wondering what then happens with this data next. So I know those were a couple of things, but.
Great. So I referenced year to year as it relates to content grade and areas, and also by grade level, specifically with high school around their core content. As it relates to the collaborative effort, well, one, in our office, we've built several dashboards that are internally facing that shows like chronic absenteeism, discipline, and a number of other attendance, things of that nature, where schools as well as central office can chart their progress on a regular basis. And it updates in real time. We also have an outward facing from the Division of Accountability. We have an outward facing dashboard that also looks at some of these same indicators. Now, as far as the collaborative nature, our office sends out monthly chronic absenteeism rates by school, by grade span, and overall as a whole, when it relates to how students are doing with grade distribution. These are meetings that happen on a regular basis with academics as well as the area office leadership. So conversations continue to see the trends in our data, but what you specifically asked for, we'll work on that and get that back to you. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Board members, are there any other questions? Okay, Mr. Whittington. Oh, I actually do have one question, real quick. So I heard when you were talking about the rates of I guess you could say of passing, I heard you say something on the lines of where high school is more course, I can't remember the exact term you used, but more course or credit binding, and while middle school and elementary school is more the training, I guess you could say, cycle. I just wanted to kind of like ask a question about that because of the fact that I was like, so if that's the case in elementary school and middle school, are those, training cycles, basically like your training wheels of your school experience, then how does it work with retention in like middle school or like even elementary school? Because of the fact that couldn't that be like a, I can say it's kind of like an arguing point, basically, that if elementary school and middle school, according to our data, is used as like our training wheel years, then could we really classify like any student being, staying back for a grade level or so?
Currently within our school district, there isn't a metric or a test that students are taking to move their classification from one grade to the next. So for example, when the students starting at third grade take the MCAP assessment, if they're not proficient or deemed proficient, they can still move on to the next grade level. Now, are students retained in our school district or just any school district? Students are retained, but they're very few, or the percentage of students retained nationally, K-8 is less than 1%. But my point was when you get to ninth grade, you start bearing credits, which now they need 22 credits to exit school, along with a few other things, community service hours, testing requirements, etc., to exit school with a diploma. It starts to count in ninth grade when you start taking these 4 courses and the other courses in order for you to pass. So those credits, those 22 credits are those classes in high school that will exit you from school. Whereas in middle school and elementary school, the class that you're taking doesn't count towards you exiting school. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I just wanted to get a little bit of clarification on that.
Yeah, so you can be retained in elementary and middle, but it's very rare that we see large numbers of students being retained.
Right, it's mostly in high school.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. I think I have one second round question for Dr. Anderful. Oh, yeah, we can't hear you.
Just realized that. Okay. I'll be quick. Thank you. So I think part of what I was also getting at in my first question will align with this one. So, you said that there's some internally facing and externally facing data via dashboard and otherwise, and then some reporting that you all share out on a recurring basis. Who then does the analysis? Whose responsibility is it? Is there any analysis that's done, whether it's in thinking about, again, like I mentioned, if there's data that's disaggregated where schools can kind of look at their own data, is it the responsibility of the school, like some of the principals that were just here, is it their responsibility? And I'm also wondering, when we think about, chronic absenteeism and some of the other data that you're showing here, do schools actually have information, or do we have information about how we compare with neighboring school districts or with others in the state, just to kind of get a better sense of, what is our data actually showing us and how are we faring in regards to others? Who does the analysis, and do we have access to that data as well?
Right. Our comparison point with neighboring school districts is the Maryland State Department of Education website. And there's a wealth of information there around attendance, around graduation rates, MCAP scores, etc., when we wanted to compare ourselves, even down to the student and service groups. That's a comparison point. Now, as far as our collaborative efforts and the analysis of that, some of that is done when we have these quarterly stat days within our area office, and area office brings together different central offices to think partners and collaborate with leadership within the schools, because the principals come to those meetings with a number of key leaders within their building, and they have to walk through a number of items that move into the school improvement round. So our office does do some of the analysis. Jamie's going to, Dr. Bowers is going to speak next. Her office has an analysis arm within her office as well. And I know academics can speak on the analysis that they do within the data from a day-to-day basis as well. Dr. Strader wants to add to that.
No, that's very comprehensive. So one of the things we're tasked with is trying to put the data out there in a digestible way so that all end users can be able to do their analysis. So it's not requiring any high level of psychometrics or anything of that sort. So if you go into the dashboards and you take a look at it, you can filter, you can download into Excel, you can do all kinds of wonderful things. So we would encourage you to get into those dashboards and take a look for yourself. Thank you. And we are now at 6:37. I want to make sure that we have enough time to get Dr. Bauer's presentation through so we can conclude at 7. Just putting a reminder out there.
Yep. Let's get this on the road. Dr. Bowers.
Good evening. So this evening, I'm going to be sharing 2 sets of data. I'm going to be sharing our DIBELS fall administration data and our benchmark 1 data. Just as a point of note, we currently just closed our DIBELS winter benchmark administration, and we are getting ready to close our benchmark winter administration hopefully next Tuesday. And then when we meet again with the Academic Achievement Committee later on in the spring, we will be sharing our winter DIBELS data and our benchmark 2 data updates. Just some background information on our DIBELS. So we do use the DIBELS assessment as our universal screener. It is required by Maryland law that each local school system has a universal screener to identify students who are at risk for reading in a minimum of grades kindergarten through 2. Prince George's County also administers the DIBELS assessment to students in grades 3. So we are seeing a comprehensive view of our early learners in literacy in grades kindergarten through 3. So when you look at the schedule for the year, we have a beginning of year, that's our BOY. We have a middle of year, that's our MOY, and we had an end of year assessment, our EOY. And you can see each of those windows. And across the top, you can see the 5 different subtest measures that are given on DIBELS. We have our letter naming fluency for our students in kindergarten and 1st grade. We have our phoneme segmentation fluency for our students in 1st and 2nd grade. We have our nonsense word fluency for students in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. We have our word reading fluency in K through 3. And then we have our oral reading fluency subtest in grades 1 through 3. Just some information on our participation rate for our beginning of year assessment. This data was as of the end of October. That's when the beginning of year DIBELS assessment closed. We had about a 97% participation rate. Like I said, this is a required state assessment to look at screening of all students. So we typically have between a 95 and 98% participation rate across all of our schools in kindergarten through 3. So that gives us about 38,265 students who completed. 30 of our schools had a 100% completion rate. Not all schools are going to have a 100% completion rate. We do have absences. We do have students who are special education who may take another assessment. We do have some students who are multilingual learner that are newcomers that may not enroll in time to take the DIBELS. So we do have some reasons why there are not 100% completion rates across all schools, but for the majority, most of our K through 3 students are taking this assessment. We also have a Lectura version of DIBELS, which is the Spanish version of DIBELS. That is given at our immersion schools. That is not given across all of our elementary schools of students whose Spanish is their native language. It is only administered at our immersion schools that teach Spanish as another language. So over those schools, we have an 86% participation rate. So that's about 931 students who are completing that Lectura version. And 2 of our schools that are immersion schools had a 100% completion rate. Just some background information on the different subtests that DIBELS administers. So when you see these 3-letter acronyms, this is kind of a glossary of terms that you can use to go back and look at what each of these acronyms means. But most of these are relating back to the subtests that I mentioned a few slides ago of the different measures that DIBELS is giving to each of the 4 grade levels. So looking at our beginning of year data, we are looking at beginning of year SY25s. So if you look across the bands, you're looking at 4 different colors. That's how DIBELS reports students who are well below the benchmark, who are below the benchmark, at the benchmark, and above the benchmark. So ideally, we are looking for a majority of our students to be in that green, which is at benchmark, or the blue, which is above benchmark. They don't say that students are at grade level or below grade level because DIBELS is not measuring students' grade level. It's actually measuring where they are in their 4 subtests on those early literacy or reading skills. So that's why DIBELS uses the terminology benchmark. So if you look at our grade kindergarten, you're going to see about 44% of our students are at the at or above benchmark. So we're closing in on that range of about 50% of our students at the beginning of the year are at or above benchmark. About 46% of our first graders are at that measure of at or above benchmark. Same with our second grade population, and about 43% of our third grade students at the beginning of the year were at or above benchmark. So when you look at a comparison, because DIBELS has been administered in our district for 3 years, this current school year is the 3rd year we've administered this assessment to students in grades K through 3. So if you look at a 3-year comparison trend, over on the right-hand side, you're going to see arrows. So our kindergarten students are performing about the same as where they did last year at this same time with those kindergarten students. So our kindergartners from school year 24 and our kindergartners from school year 25 are performing about the same as far as measuring students who are at and above the benchmark. That's why you see that yellow sideways arrow. The other 3 grade levels, however, you see green arrows pointing up. That means that each of those 3 other grade levels are performing higher than their peers in the prior year. So our first grade students this past year performing higher than our first grade students last year by a few percentage points. Same with our second grade and our third grade students. So this is a trend that we would expect to see, especially at the beginning of the year. The benchmark for DIBELS at the beginning of the year is a little bit easier for students to meet that at and above. When I come back and share with you the middle of year data or the MOY data, you may notice some other trends. Our middle of year DIBELS assessment is a bit more challenging for students. The expectations grow increasingly as you go throughout the year. And then our end of year typically shows some growth as well, because it's not as rigorous at the end of the year as it is at our middle of year point for DIBELS. But definitely pointing in the right direction of the signs that we want to see at this point in the year for our students at the beginning of the year in their early literacy skills. When we look at our lectora, we're looking at very high rates of students in all 4 grade levels of students who are at and above benchmark, as you can see with our green and blue bars. So we always like to look for those students who are in that yellow band, or our students who are below benchmark. So they're not quite at benchmark, but they're not quite below. They're kind of in that between area. So for the last 3 years, we've looked at students who are about 6 composite points or less away from being identified at benchmark, which is that green band. So when we look at our table, we're looking at number of testers in that first row. So you can see across each of those grade levels, we have between 1,100 and 1,600 students who are 6 composite points or less away from that green or at benchmark band, which is great. That's a high percentage. If you look at the third column, that is the percent of students who are, 6 composite points away from that. So in first grade, we have almost 65% of those students are 6 composite points away. Which is great. We definitely want to see that trend. We would like to see a little bit higher in our kindergarten and third grade trends, but our second grade trend is almost nearing that 50% as well. If you look at the trend data from school year 23 and school year 24, this data for the 6 composite points away more closely mirrors where we were in school year 23 than it did in school year 24. Last year, we were seeing a little bit higher rate of students who were closer to that green at benchmark. So if you look at the SY24 column, about 34% of students were 6 points away from benchmark in kindergarten, whereas this year there were only 24. So you can look at, they're not huge differences, but there are slight differences across each grade level for that 6-point composite. So we always like to look at the highlights of our subtests that are given for DIBELS. So you can see across the board on our subtests that are given, we're looking at nice increases across the board for each of our grade levels, with the exception of a slight 1 percentage point decrease for our kindergarten students in phonemic awareness. And just to kind of share a little bit more about the phonemic awareness. So how that's administered on DIBELS is the teacher will have 1 minute with each student, and the examiner will say a word that has 3 or 4 phonemes or sounds. So for example, the teacher might say cat, and the student is supposed to say the sounds in that word. For example, they would say cat. The examiner marks each correct sound segment that the student says. And so the student score is based on how many correct segments they are able to get in 1 minute. And so why this is important is this skill is very, very key in determining students' future reading success. And so that's a little bit of a concern that we're seeing a decrease in our kindergartners on that particular skill, but 1% is not a statistically significant decrease. So it's something we'll just keep an eye on, but we definitely want to make sure our kindergartners have that phoneme awareness skill set to be able to hear sounds and differentiate them in words. But other than that, you know, we're seeing pretty steady increases across all of our other grade levels and our other DIBEL subtests. When we look at our district in comparison to the nation, so we have about 370,000 other students across the country that are taking this assessment. So when we look at our comparison to each of the 4 grade levels and those other students as a whole, when you see the arrows, a down arrow doesn't necessarily mean it's negative. So if you look at the first column of red where it says students who are well below benchmark, the first arrow of kindergartner is below, but that's actually a good sign. We actually want our numbers in that red column to be going down. We want less students in that well below category as compared to their peers across the nation. So you see that in kindergarten. However, in grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, there's slightly higher numbers in that well below than in comparison to their peers across the nation. If you look at the yellow below benchmark, we also would like to see a decrease in those because we want more students to be in that green or at benchmark or that blue above benchmark. So you do see across all the grade levels with the exception of grade 3, which is similar numbers to comparison of their peers in the nation, that those have lower numbers of students in that below benchmark. And then if you go across to the green, we see even numbers of students in kindergarten across the nation and grade K, but lower numbers in grade 2. And where we really want to see the upward facing arrows is that last column, our above benchmark level in blue. So we see that our students in kindergarten, we see that our students in grade 1 are above the number of their peers across the nation in that above benchmark. So that's definitely a positive sign. We want to see more of those arrows in that last column pointing up. So I'm going to share just some brief iReady data. Our district also administers the iReady assessment to students in kindergarten through grade 8 now this year. So we're going to look at some data for our iReady trends from summer regression and then our beginning of year data. So when we're looking at the state of student learning last school year, you're looking at the percentage of students on grade level by year. So if you're looking at the historical trend is that gray bar, the one on the left for each grade level. And then our spring 22 is the lightest green. The medium green is our spring 23 and the darkest green is our spring 24. So what you can see here is actually our on grade level percentages are kind of at a stagnant level. And in some cases, they are actually slightly declining. And so this is national trend data. So we're seeing students across the nation that are taking this iReady assessment, which is also a very large population of students that take this assessment, are either trending about the same or slight declines. There are a few grades that show slight increases, but across the whole, we are seeing about the same pre-pandemic in those, grade 4 to grade 8, as far as where students are in reading. So how have our district looked from fall to fall? So we have been administering the iReady assessment for several years. However, we're just looking at it from a 3-year perspective, which is similar to our DIBELS data. And so the iReady assessment looks at students who are in that green band at the top, mid or above grade level. So this assessment is a bit different than DIBELS. This is looking at students who are reading at or above grade level in the current grade level that they're in. That light green is early on grade level. The yellow is 1 year below. The light red is 2 years below, and the dark red is 3 grade levels below. So if you're looking at our DIBELS, or I'm sorry, our iReady data as a 3-year trend, we are kind of holding steady at the number of students who are respectively in each of those categories. So iReady is measuring not only some of our early literacy skills, but it's looking more at fluency and comprehension. And so, looking across the distribution, we are starting to see, as you get into 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, more students are increasing in those numbers of, 2+ grade levels below reading where they should be at this point in the year in the fall. And then one of the things our board members like to look at last year is how much did summer learning or summer slide impact our students. And so if you look across the bar chart, the light blue is the prior year gain. The dark blue is the current year start. And so if you look at the arrows, everything is kind of circled in orange, is comparing to that national summer gain loss in that center column. So we're not really experiencing too much summer slide at this point as measured on the iReady. And this is something that our partners and curriculum associates kind of meet with us each time we give the iReady and kind of talk about where we see our district and how much we're impacting over that summer slide, or from the fall to the winter, winter to the spring, where our students are as far as reading on grade level, early grade level, or below. So it's something we're definitely keeping an eye on. We did talk earlier about our CSI schools, so I wanted to show an example of looking at our CSI schools. We're seeing a very similar trend as far as our summer slide. And I'm going to let Dr. McDaniel speak to the next 2 slides, and then I'm going to share some information regarding our benchmark 1 assessment data.
Yes, I'll be very brief because I want to make sure we get to that benchmark data. But as you all have heard this evening, we collect a lot of data. But the point of collecting this data is to be able to make sound instructional decisions. And so that we're providing the support, the intervention, the acceleration, whatever is needed for our students for where they are. And so the DIBELS data is telling us what support a student might need, what interventions might be needed. And so we know that the regular communication with our school administrators, training our teachers on what their student data means and how that can impact in their instruction, make sure that we have sound data-driven decision-making. And so our department shares information. We can go to the next slide, Jamie. We just wanted to share with you all an example of what a school gets on about a 6-week rotation regarding the progress monitoring of how students are performing on those indicators Dr. Bowers shared earlier. And so an individual school is going to get their school-based data sheet to see how students are performing on one of our interventions, our Lexia Core 5, that helps students as they're progressing throughout those various indicators that were shared. And so we are letting them know how their individual school is performing, how their students are doing, and some of the instructional implications for making sure that students move forward. And if the appropriate number of students are not involved in the intervention, they get that information as well, so that principals can follow up with their teachers. Instructional directors also receive these data sheets for the schools that they support, so that everyone is on the same page with regards to what the data is, how students are performing, what needs to be done, and what needs to be changed instructionally. So Jamie, I'll turn it back over to you for our benchmark data.
Thank you. So we'll be sharing benchmark 1 results for our elementary, middle school, and high school reading and mathematics from our fall. Like I said, we are currently administering our benchmark 2 data. With the snow coming, it kind of keeps pushing back our test administration window a little bit. So hopefully we can close our window on Tuesday and get our data for benchmark 2 that is coinciding with quarter 2. So just some background information on our benchmark assessments. So we do have benchmark assessments in all 4 core contents. We're just going to be sharing our English language arts and mathematics this evening. But we do have, very similar to how we report out for DIBELS, similar to how we report out for our state assessments, 4 different performance levels. We look at emerging learners, developing learners, on-track learners, and advanced learners. And our benchmark assessments are not designed to give us information for a student being on grade level, which is why we don't refer to in our performance levels as a student being proficient or on grade level. Our benchmarks are meant to be at the end of a quarter of instruction to look at if a student is gaining the concepts or standards that was taught in that 45 days of instruction. So the reporting has a 150-point score that each student gets a scale score, which is very similar to DIBELS. It's very similar to our MCAP. That 150-point scale score range coincides with one of those four color band performance levels. For our benchmarks, we had approximately 164,300 students take the reading benchmark 1, and we had and mathematics. And that was an increase by about 1,900 assessments from the prior school year. So we have almost 165,000 assessments in both reading and mathematics being administered in our schools at the end of quarter 1. 2 things of note for this year. As we look at our trend data over the last 5 years, we've been administering our district benchmark program. This is the 5th year that we are administering these assessments at the end of our quarter. We had some shifts in middle school reading. There was a curriculum sequence change for benchmark 1. So when we're looking at trend data, our benchmark 1 data for this current school year cannot necessarily be compared to our benchmark 1 from prior school years because there were some curriculum sequence changes. And in high school mathematics, this current school year, our first-time 9th grade students took geometry. And in the past, our first-time 9th grade students have taken Algebra 1. So when you're looking at the test taker count for each of those courses, you have to take that into consideration because you have different groups of students who traditionally would have taken Algebra 1 as 9th grade. We had very, very few students take the Algebra 1 benchmark this year because most of our 10th grade students had already taken Algebra 1 in 9th grade. So we had a significant uptick in the number of students who took geometry. So that is the first time 9th grade assessment this school year. Looking at our overall data analysis for benchmark 1 across all grade levels and courses, there was a slight decrease, and that was about a 1% decrease, not statistically significant, but nonetheless something that we want to keep an eye on. I'll talk about in a few slides the reason that we've pinpointed that we did see a decrease across the average of all grade levels. And that second bullet starts to allude to that. Our performance of our students on the overall written constructed responses had a measurable impact on the overall score of our benchmarks. And we'll talk about that in a few slides. In reading, we did have some overall improvement in our high school grades, English 9 and English 10, and then grade 8 remain unchanged. For mathematics, we're looking at a different story for mathematics. We did see overall improvement across all of our mathematics assessments in the district. We saw about a 4% increase in our benchmark 1 from school year 24 to school year 25, which is great. We've been spending a lot of time as a district focusing on mathematics. And so this 4% increase is definitely a sign that that impact is being felt in schools and students are able to demonstrate higher learning on our benchmarks in mathematics. The last bullet, if you look at students in grades 2, 7, 8, and our accelerated mathematics 1 and 2 courses, Foundations for Algebra, Algebra 1, Quantitative Modeling, and Algebra 2, all saw increases in our benchmark achievement from last school year to this school year. Grade 5 in geometry didn't see improvement, but remain unchanged. So being unchanged isn't necessarily bad. It's, you know, we're holding steady in those 2 courses. So if you look at our comparison from last school year to this school year, you're going to see very similar reporting as DIBELS, except it's a little, we're looking at a little bit differently, but we're still looking at those color bands. So we definitely want to see students moving away from the red and the yellow. So we want to see students moving away from that emerging and developing learner in those left color bands, more into the on track and advanced learner. So if you look at each grade level, you can see how many students are scoring at the on and advanced learner in each grade level. And you can see across the grades, we're not seeing significant shifts. So for example, in grade 3, last school year, we had about 15% of our students who were on or advanced learners. This year, we had about 13%. So we're not seeing, you know, high significant declines in percentage proficiency, or not proficiency on track, but we are still seeing some small decreases. So we're definitely keeping an eye on that and what that means. When I shared some information on iReady, that's some of the same trend that we're seeing in iReady, as well as students not reading on grade level or that early on grade level. So definitely keeping track of these percentages over time. In mathematics, it's a similar story. Unfortunately, we do want to see less of our emerging and developing learner, but in mathematics, we do see across most of our grade levels, most of our students currently are achieving in that emerging and developing learner for benchmark 1. However, we did see improvements in some of our grade levels, so that's a positive sign that what we're doing in schools is having some impact on students in Q1 in instruction. So one of the things we pointed out earlier was, you know, what could be having an impact on the slight decrease in reading, that 1% decrease. And so we started looking at how are students doing overall in writing. So writing takes up a large portion of the assessment, specifically in reading. And so on our reading benchmarks, we have anywhere from 10 to 12 items. And writing is one of those 10 to 12 items. However, the writing number of points is about a third, sometimes a little higher than a third of the overall points of the assessment. And so when we looked at, for grade 3, as an example, we wanted to look at how many students are actually scoring a 0 on the writing item, which means that they are getting 0 out of between 12 and 19 points. So about 40% of our students earned a 0 on that writing item, just for example, in grade 3. And so they missed out on 12 points on that benchmark 1, and the total number of points on the entire test was 30. So when you look at how that's weighted, about 40% of the assessment was weighted in that writing item, just as an example. In mathematics, very similar. We have 2 different writing items. However, they're not weighted as heavily as on the reading assessment. We have a modeling item and we have a reasoning item on each grade level. So for example, in benchmark 3 for grade 3, the total number of points on the test was 15. We have a modeling item, which students need to have a written or constructed response in addition to usually solving an equation, providing an equation, or providing an answer. So that was worth 3 points. The number of points for reasoning was 3 points. So when we're looking all the way across the table, how many students were earning zeros on reasoning and modeling items? Again, almost half of our students are earning 0 points on those items. And so, what does that mean? When we're seeing a decline across our reading, certainly, that means that a lot of our students are either writing nothing for a writing item, they're writing very minimal, which means they are not earning a score on the rubric, or they're writing something that's completely inaccurate and then earning a 0 score. And so same thing for mathematics, students are either not answering the modeling and reasoning items, or they are answering the item wrong, or they are not putting enough information to warrant a score on the rubric above a 0. And so this information has been shared with principals. It's been shared with assistant principals. We shared it with our CSI and ATSI schools last week at the Winter Institute, which Ms. Smith discussed. So this is definitely something as a district that we are keeping a close eye on and making sure that we are sharing this information with schools. When our office meets with school test coordinators and data coaches, we make sure that this data is at the forefront, because we want to make sure that students are having every opportunity to answer these writing items on our benchmarks, to make sure that we are gaining as much information about how they can respond to reading or write about a modeling and reasoning item as possible. So those are my slides. I know we're 8 minutes past the time, but I'm sure there may be some questions. So I'll pause for questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Board Member Going McCants.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I just had three main questions, and I'll just give them all to you at once. For DIBELS and iReady, which one are we using as a district to progress monitor towards MCAP? And is that information shared with parents? I know that was technically 2 questions, but that was what I was counting as question number 1. And then the second question was specifically with correlations. How are the benchmark assessments correlated with MCAP as well? And then my third one was kind of related to the first question, but specifically, how are those numbers communicated with individual parents at the elementary level and then students at the high school level, especially considering our new 3rd grade reading decision that parents are having to make? How are we giving this information to parents so that they can make an informed decision?
Sure. So we do not use DIBELS to correlate to MCAP, because DIBELS is used to screen students for early literacy skills. We do, however, our iReady assessment, our Curriculum Associates partner, who is the vendor that supplies our iReady assessment, is doing a long-range study on iReady data and its correlation to MCAP performance. So that's something that our district is not participating in, but the vendor is, and sharing that information with us. What our district looks more closely at is benchmarks, which you alluded to. The setup of our benchmark, the test form, with the multiple select and technology enhanced and constructed response items mirrors exactly what students are going to see on the state assessment in a much smaller version. So where you have 12 items on a benchmark for Q1, at the end of year summative MCAP assessment, you have about 35 items. So it's about a third of what students are going to see. But those benchmarks, when you look across the year, we have a benchmark 1, we have a benchmark 2, and then an optional benchmark 3 that schools may opt to use. When you combine all of those 3 assessment standards together, they make up almost what is assessed at the end of year summative assessment on the MCAP. We also do have a data management and reporting office within my department. We do have a psychometrician on staff. We have looked at several year trends of our benchmarks in relation to our MCAP. We definitely do see correlation. So when we have seen spikes in improvement in MCAP, specifically in high school in grade 10, 2 years ago, we saw the same thing in our benchmark data. I'm not going to say it's across the board that our benchmarks are, exactly equated to MCAP, but we definitely have seen some strong correlation to over, all three benchmarks being administered, how that could potentially be a predictor for MCAP. And your last question about parents. So when we do our trainings with our school test coordinators and our data coaches, we share all of the resources that we have available. We also have a parent portal site where parents can actually go in and download and view benchmark individual student reports, which are very similar to our MCAP reports. We give schools some tips and some strategies when it's parent-teacher conference time to kind of speak to parents about the results. We work with Dr. Jackson's office and do some Zoom sessions on looking at the individual student reports. And then as schools request our presence, for example, I'm working with Lake Arbor Elementary School this week. They're actually doing a data night for parents. So we love when, schools invite us to come to school, whether it be virtual or in person. Last year, we did a great parent seminar at one of the Spanish immersion schools. And so as much as we can in my office, we like to get out in front of parents and kind of share this information. But when we can't, we like to help support schools with some of those resources too, so they can as well.
Thank you so much.
Can I, Dr. Anderful?
Yes, thank you. Am I on mute? Nope, I'm not. Okay. Thank you so much for that presentation. I just wanted to start by saying, quite honestly, thank you. I think this was a really thorough and helpful presentation, and I appreciated the way that you outlined the data and also provided national comparisons and trends. And I thought it was really well done. So thank you so much for doing that. There were a few slides that I think we just didn't have uploaded in Board Docs. So I just wanted to make a request that the updated presentation be added. I know there was one slide that I like to follow along on my big screen. There was one slide, I think slide 19, that showed some trends that I thought was a really interesting slide that we didn't have access to. And so just wanted to make sure that was added. And then I think to Board Member Goins McCants' last question about parents and how they're receiving. Again, like I said, I'm a parent. I appreciate receiving the DIBELS printout, getting that, even if I don't have the opportunity to speak with, my son's teacher, because I don't have that opportunity every time it's released, unfortunately. So the online access that you mentioned, I'm actually not familiar with that. Maybe other parents are. So I guess my question there is, how is that offering made known to parents? I'm not familiar with that.
Sure. So usually that we communicate with our school test coordinators at each building. And so sometimes when we have a new school test coordinator, or a school test coordinator that's really overwhelmed, that's our cue that maybe we need to do a little bit better of a job communicating with them. But when the platform is populated with benchmark individual student reports, usually a parent would get an email. And so a lot of times that's predicated on the district having a valid and current email address for each parent. Sometimes we don't have that, but I agree. I think that that's probably an area that we could strengthen a little bit because it's hard. Last year we had about 5,000 parents of the 130,000+ students that access that benchmark platform to look at their students' individual student report. So that tells us, the message is getting out there, but not as widespread as it needs to be. And so that's why, hopefully our office can have some more presentation time with Dr. Jackson and her family and community engagement sessions, as well as, working more closely with our school test coordinators to get that information out to the parents to make sure. And that can also be something from my office that I put in a memo to schools to make sure that if that information didn't go out on like a school's website or a Google Classroom or Canva, the Canvas site, that we push that information out there again to make sure it's getting down to parents and families.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Okay. I do not have any questions. Board members, do you have any more questions? And always remember, if you have any questions for any of the 3 presentations, you can always send them to Rosa, and Rosa will send them to the admin so that you guys can get a response. But if there is no if there's no more questions, then we'll just move on to the next thing. But I believe there is no further business. So I would say thank you so much everyone for the great presentations. Just like I wanted to say, just like I said before, any follow-ups from tonight's meeting could be shared to Rosa so that can be shared to any of the administration staff. I would like to thank the public, the committee members, PGCPS administration staff, and the board office for joining us this evening. There being no further business, the time is now 7:18 p.m. and the February 10th Academic Achievement Committee is now adjourned. Thank you for everyone for the great meeting tonight.
Thank you all.